In conversation with Corey Brotherson. Corey Brotherson is an award-winning Birmingham-based freelance writer, editor, and creative consultant who has built a 24-year career in the video game industry, writing for over a dozen companies including PlayStation, King, and Apple. Is a narrative designer, writer for the in-development adventure game Windrush Tales, worked as lead narrative designer for Surgent Studios Game Award and BAFTA-nominated Tales of Kenzera Zoo, and became a full voting member of BAFTA in 2022 after 2 consecutive years as a BAFTA Game Award judge. Corey is also the editor for children's book publisher Butterfly Books and has co-created critically acclaimed graphic novels Magic of Might, Clockwork Watch, and Deadlier Than. Recently, he became assistant producer for Yomi Ayeni's directorial debut film, Age of Quorum. He's currently penning his first novel, represented by WMU's Anna Dixon, with other prose work in the pipeline. And on today's episode of Auto Interview, it's my utmost pleasure, joy and excitement to offer the show today, Corey Brotherson. How are you doing today, Corey? Welcome on the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm not doing too badly at all. It's been a busy few weeks and a very, very busy few years, but I'm trying to keep my head above water. So hopefully I'm not going to lose my head anytime soon.
So lovely, really. Having met at the London Book Fair, I think last month or 2 months ago, it's quite
Mhm.
lovely we're here again to sit and talk about your works. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I really appreciate you kind of like striking up conversation and getting to kind of chat because up to that point, I think I'd not really spoken to many people at the London Book Fair. So it was actually really cool to get to speak to another person, especially another like author, and especially within the industry as well. So
Yeah.
really cool. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, Corey, I need to first say that I am taken aback by the description page of your book, Magic of Might, in Amazon. And I would like us to start today's conversation by asking the obvious question most authors get asked. What inspired you to write Magic of Might, and how does this book came to be?
Yeah. So it's this one's a bit of a, a long convoluted tale.
Mm,
So initially, because I left full-time work for the first time back in 2005,
yeah,
and I wanted to start writing comic books, but I'd never written any comic books up to that point, and I managed to get lucky enough to just kind of start writing a few comic books for a few different publishers.
yeah,
And at one point, Marvel Comics had opened up their doors to pitches. So they were basically saying, usually it's like they go to authors, they go to writers and creators, and they kind of like say, we want you to write this book. But at this
yeah.
particular moment in their history, they said, actually, we're going to open our doors so anybody can throw an idea to us. And if we like it, we'll publish it with them.
That's,
So I thought this is a big opportunity. And I was working with another artist called Sergio Calvet. Um, and we wanted to kind of put together and create a story which was developed around our love of mythology. Because I grew up on things like Clash of the Titans and the Sinbad movies and the Harryhausen
mm,
movies, basically, all the ones stop
yeah,
animations on the skeletons and the mythological Greek mythological creatures. And we both loved those things. So we wanted to create a series which was kind of like around you taking those elements. But before we could put something together, Marvel
yeah,
Comics stopped the open admissions. So it was like, okay, wow, okay, there's nothing else we can do with that. But we did
mm,
actually have a publisher who was happy to wanted to put us together for a series anyway. So we started developing the series a little bit more.
yeah,
And then that publisher said, like, actually, I've had to change our plans. We can't do this anymore. But I still suggest that you guys carry on doing what you're doing and
yeah,
maybe publish it yourselves. So me and Sergio sat down and we developed the story together. We started putting together the idea of initially it was a young man who was trapped in a strange universe that was full of elements of like nursery rhymes, fairy tales, fantasy characters that we're all familiar with for a very
yeah,
specific reason,
absolutely.
and having to fight their way through these different characters to get to prove themselves in these different trials. Um, and then Sergio kind of said, "Oh, well, how about we change it to a female character? Because I want to draw a female character rather than a male one. I've been drawing a lot of male characters."
Yeah,
And I said, "That sounds good to me." So I rewrote the story
yeah,
to kind of fit to make the fact that it is actually now a woman character, and we developed it that way. So really the story kind of came from a mishmash of different ideas and different inspirations and wanting to be able to work together to be
Mm,
able to create something that we felt was expressing our love for different types of mythology, whether it was Greek, Roman,
mm,
Celtic, different areas, different sources, and also kind of talk about inspiration of what we kind of like grew up on as well, story wise. So both Sergio and I grew up on both literature, on books, on comic books,
yeah.
on films, TV, all those things, and we wanted to kind of really pay homage to those and really kind of put together a story which kind of allowed us to reference those things all together, but
Mm,
also kind of create an entirely new story and talk about the power of stories that are basically on us as people, how short
yes.
stories shape our identities, shape our journeys through life, and really
Mm,
allow us to forge a path into what we want to be and who we want to be.
yeah.
So that's really where Magic and Myths really kind of becomes a bit more whole in that respect. It is very much a story about stories, about influencing how we want to kind of create our own like visions of ourselves essentially for our
Mm.
life.
Oh, wow. That's quite amazing to know, really. I love your take on that. Your description of that is quite amazing, quite lovely, quite interesting, and quite captivating, really. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for giving us a bit into the making of Magic of Might. And if you have a copy of the book there before I proceed, I'd like you to show it to the camera, just know
Sure.
what it looks like. And
Here
that's a
is
beautiful cover in there. Would you like to talk about the making of the cover? Quite
Yeah,
great.
so this is actually the compendium edition. So what Sergio and I did, Magic and Myths turned 12 about 2 years ago.
Oh,
And
wow.
what we decided to do was create a book, a combined edition of the book, which had every single story we've done today, which is about 8 different stories, including like one main strand of the story. But then
Mm,
on top of that, we have like several short stories as well.
mm,
So we wanted to actually put together a total edition that kind of tells the story so far in one handy volume, so people can kind of pick it up and just get straight into the story and get to exactly where we are in the story because it's still ongoing. We're still putting together several other kind of
mm,
chapters of the story coming up. So Sergio wanted to create a cover which kind of had references to their various aspects of the story so far. So we've got the main character Eve here,
yeah.
who's covered in her magical light armor, her hard light armor, which can create weapons, any sort of weapons that she can kind of think of, as long as they can be held and attached to her
Mm,
wrist. And here we've actually got a stone statue of one of the other main characters,
yeah.
called Robin, who is actually Robin from the Shakespeare's play A Midsummer Night's Dream. Who's actually in her story, she's actually read the story the script that Shakespeare's written, and
Mm,
realized that Shakespeare's turned her into a male hobgoblin fellow called Puck or Robin Goodfellow. And so
wow.
she's really angry about that, and she goes on a mission to kind of find out why this mortal had the audacity to change her entire
Mm,
character, which sets her life on an entirely different path, which is very much a theme of the entire Magic and Myths. And then at the
yeah.
very top we have a owl, which is related to one of the main villains of the story. Which, if you read the story, you'll find out the relevance as to why it's an owl and why it's actually on top of all the other characters right here.
That's amazing, really. One of the reasons why I feel you should talk about the making of the cover is the fact that I've come to realize that aside from writing, because I know every novel, every story, every book has a story behind it, sometimes I think that even book covers, book design, has a story behind them as well. And just as we have a story on art in terms of writing, we also have art in terms of drawing, in terms of graphic design, in terms of sculpture, in terms of painting. So every painting, every work of an artist, etc., has a meaning behind it. Even I myself, some of my book covers, I'm like, this is what I want you to do. I will tell the graphic designer because this particular part, this is a person. I mean, every part of it has a story, has something hidden within it that it's very particular to the writer and also to the book, really. I love your description of that. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Corey, your work spanned comics, graphic novels, and video games. Do you approach storytelling differently in each medium, or is there a common thread that ties them all together? And also, what kind of scenes do you enjoy writing? I think I've got two questions in there already.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess my approach to the different mediums is always thinking about the audience first. I'm a person that feels like you try to make your writing as interactive as possible, regardless of whether it's a video game, whether it's a book, whether it's a comic book, whether it's TV, movies, whatever.
Mm,
You're trying to engage the audience so they're not just passively sitting there and absorbing it. They
absolutely.
have to think about it. They have to be
Yeah.
able to try and,
Engage.
make connections
Be
while
involved.
they're engaging. Exactly,
Mm.
exactly. So when I'm thinking about the audience, like with a comic book, for example, um, the form of the comic book itself is individual pages where you have panels which are broken down into on a
Mm.
page. And so you're thinking about how the audience's journey from panel to panel is progressing, what you're conveying in the story as you're going along the page itself. You especially have two pages in front of you, so naturally the audience or the reader in this particular case can see the second page at the same time as the first page, and you can play with that. You can play with that expectation. You can play
Yeah.
with that level of awareness that they're going
Yeah.
through when they're reading the book itself. So there are different aspects like that when I think about when I'm doing comic books. When I'm writing prose, that's a different altogether thing where I'm thinking about how the reader's eye is scanning down the page. I'm thinking about how the shape of the words and the paragraphs are kind of creating as they're going down the page itself. I'm not just thinking about sentences, I'm not just thinking about word choice. I'm thinking about how the page actually looks on a
Yeah.
subconscious level, because that can sometimes put the reader off.
Yeah.
So these are kind of like aesthetic things which I think are really important.
Mm.
Naturally, with games, it's really about trying to think about how to engage the player on a
Absolutely.
gameplay level.
Yeah.
I've always said in like some of my teaching and my talks, when you're writing for a video game, you can have the best story in the world, but if you're not
Mm.
engaging the player in some sorts of gameplay, then there's always a chance you're going to lose them. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's if you have a story which is basically needs to be diminished a little bit or changed because the gameplay needs to be elevated,
Yeah.
then you've got to make that hard decision and elevate the gameplay over the story, because the gameplay is what's going to keep the player there ultimately.
Mm.
If the game's not fun, then the chances are they're just going to bounce off the game. So the story can be
Absolutely.
great, but you've really got to make those collaborative decisions and compromises. It's like when I was working on Tales of Kenzera Zao,
Mm.
we had many discussions and many meetings with the game design team, and sometimes like they would say, "Hey, we need to put this element of the game in here to make the game more fun for the player.
Yeah.
Can you come up with a story idea to help with that?" And I'd be like, "Well, yeah, but it changes the entire story. I can't just do this one thing and it without it having this ripple effect on the entire story."
Yeah.
And there was, two voices in my head going like, gotta stand for the story. You gotta hold tight for the story. Make sure the story is like, the integrity of the story stays there. But the
Yeah.
other voice in my head is going, well, it's a game. At the end of the day, it's a game. If this
Mm.
gameplay element is going to make it more fun, then it's your job, it's your responsibility to
Yeah.
make the work of the story as best as possible. Don't put your feet in the ground and say, I have to keep to my ground and make sure the story stays as it is. No, you try to rework the story so it works with the gameplay.
Mm.
So yeah, lots of different elements there that need to be thought about per medium. In terms of like, I guess commonalities, I think you were asking about before,
Yeah.
in terms of things that kind of run across all of them.
A common
Well,
thread that ties them all together.
yeah, I think the one of the most important things that I try to convey in stories is universal themes,
Mm.
regardless of what story I'm working in and what medium I'm working in. Um, you can talk about a character who is a spacefaring pirate, or you could talk about a story that is a god.
Mm.
You could talk about a story about a young girl who's just trying to survive on a day-to-day, like life. Um, it doesn't matter who you're writing about, the
Mm.
story has to have something which can allow the reader or the audience to relate to it.
Mm.
And any element that you're putting together in your story, if it doesn't have that relatable element, then there's always a chance of your audience just bouncing off it because they go, well, I don't understand. I don't understand why this character will make these decisions. I
Mm.
can't relate to them in any way. And sometimes you don't need the audience to directly relate to the characters or the protagonists or what have you, but they do need to understand why they're making those decisions, and within the context of the universe that is being created. So for me, a universality has to be there. So if you are creating a god, then you got to have to understand what that god is about, why that god makes those decisions, and relate it in a way which is going to be something that everybody can relate to one way or another. Does the god
Mm.
have like have imposter syndrome?
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
strange sort of thing, but we've all suffered from imposter syndrome at some point, especially creators.
absolutely.
Most of us do. And a god having imposter syndrome is a very relatable thing because, like, oh my god, I've got all these powers and can do anything, but I feel like I'm not worthy of this.
You
And also,
know,
it brings them down to a relatable level.
Mm.
It's very much kind of one of the stories I wrote in my anthology Deadlier is about she looks like a tiefling if we're talking using Dungeons and Dragons analogies. It's like a character with like horns in the back of their heads. They're coming from a
Mm.
demonic background, and she's only like 17 years old or something like that. But she's actually the best killer in her entire clan in this war between these
Yeah.
mechanical beings. And like again, most of us haven't been in wars. Most of us aren't killers. And most of us, in my audience, don't necessarily be teenagers, but we know what it's like to be a teenager.
Yeah.
But the thing that she suffers from is identity crisis. She suffers from mental
Mm.
illness.
Oh
She
wow.
suffers from the ability of being outcast from her clan. And I think a lot of us can relate to something like that, of being outcasted from where we've come from, whether
Yeah.
it's our friends, whether it's our family, whether it's our community, our society. A lot of
Absolutely.
us have maybe come across some sort of mental health issue in some point in our life, again, whether it's
Mm.
small or whether it's large. And a lot of us feel like, we may not necessarily feel who we want to be,
Mm.
or we feel that people feel that we're just, one particular aspect of our character or our personality when we're multifaceted. And so all these things help create this character that is a lot more relatable now, even though she's a killer, even though she's in a war, even though she's quite young. You can take these other aspects and kind of go, oh, I understand that because
Yeah.
those are the elements of her
Yeah.
character that I can relate to. So for me, that is the universal thing that should span across all my work, is that
Mm.
there has to be something which a person can directly relate to and then go, oh, okay, I feel that because I felt that myself. And
Absolutely.
I understand their decision making from that journey that they're being on.
I love your answer to this question. It sounds to me to be quite didactic in nature. It sounds to me to be quite amazing. It sounds to me to be quite lectury in nature, more like I'm inside a class and I'm listening to a lecturer speaking, giving a speech about storytelling, etc. And I love the way you're able to weave your characters in a lovely manner. And I think you would be the first. I'm not quite sure if I've done writers in this nature who also write video games, etc. I'm not quite sure. I can't remember. Yeah. Well, yours seems to be quite, it stands to me. It stays so clearly and so beautifully. I need to say thank you so much for, sharing all of these stories and for you to even, diversify and blend all of these things together, including span, comics, graphic novels, video games, all together in storytelling. I think it's a beautiful approach, really. That's quite a beautiful one. And to me, I think it might be some art tax to pursue. Not quite sure how simple or hard it is to do.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely complexities that come with it, and
Yeah.
that kind of sometimes are a little bit tricky to try and to manage.
Mm,
But I try my best. I try to
interesting.
diversify as much as possible.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. And I would like us to go into one of your books titled Clockwork Watch. Yeah, for readers who haven't read that yet, I would like you to give us a bit snippet into some of the themes and subject lines we'd expect picking that up. And if you have a copy there, I'd like you to show to the camera. Just so it's what
Yes,
it
so I have a copy of Clockwork Watch here. This is one of the
interesting.
many books that we've
Mm.
got. It's a very kind of a stark cover. This is actually an omnibus of the first three chapters, the first main kind of
Oh,
parts of the series so far. We've done about I think 12 different chapters, 12 different books.
interesting.
So this is a omnibus of the first three that we did,
Wow.
and that's actually just really a insignia of the Clockwork Watch insignia, which I'll explain in a
Mm.
second. So Clockwork Watch is a bit of a weird one. So you mentioned earlier on in my introduction about Yomi Ayeni,
Yeah.
who is a dear friend of mine. He's a filmmaker, he's a writer. He's got a lot of different hats,
Yeah.
and I was introduced to him via a mutual friend of mine called Matt Gibbs, who I worked with at PlayStation at the
Mm.
time. And Matt said that Yomi was looking for a comic book writer who would help adapt one of Yomi's screenplays into a comic book because he'd never written a comic book before.
Mm.
And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to meet him and get to talk to him about it. And I met Yomi and he said, like, Clockwork Watch is basically an expression of his desire to take the genre of steampunk and not decolonialize it because steampunk is very colonialized, and he wanted to make something which he felt was a lot less colonial because he'd been to steampunk parties and realized that he was the only black person there.
Mm.
And he was
Mm.
like, why is that? Why is it not appealing to people of color or black people in particular, to
Mm.
his experience? And so he started writing a script. He started writing stories about an Indian family coming over from Calcutta
Oh,
to
wow.
power a clockwork servants in British society
Mm.
at the request of Queen Victoria. But then that changes British society entirely because you then have all these clockwork servants gaining sentience and wanting to fight for their civil rights and wanting to fight for their autonomy. And at the same time, the Indian family that's come over has
Mm,
been led by a genius called Chan Rambir. But he is very focused and dogmatic, and he focuses all his energy into the creation of these clockwork servants,
mm,
neglecting his own family. And his son, who's only 8 years old when he comes over to the country, starts feeling very resentful of his father. And he grows up to be very bitter and very angry at his father for neglecting him and neglecting his mother as well.
mm,
And in the process of that, what happens is all these clockwork servants start either gaining sentience or they become jailbroken. So their owners start kind of jailbreaking them, making to do things which they're not being originally programmed to do. You know, whether that is something for, personal desires or whether it's to just let them, roam free or what have you.
yeah.
But either way, you get this burgeoning clockwork society now within
Mm,
Britain, and it's causing, joblessness. It's also causing like this additional kind of like level of a different type of people now trying
yeah.
to exist and just wanting to get, wanting to be their own people.
Mm,
So British government creates a subsection called Clockwork Watch. And Clockwork Watch is designed to rein in the clockworks that have been either jailbroken or have gained sentience to make
yeah.
sure that they get back in their place, as it were. So the son, Chan's son, Janav, from the Indian family that came over, he is then hired to become the lead of Clockwork Watch. The
Mm,
problem is, though, because he's so embittered and so angry at his father, he can't express that in a way which is actually directed at his father. So he
mm,
expresses it in a way which is directed at the Clockwork Servant and the Clockwork Society.
mm.
So in this world of Clockwork Watch, he effectively becomes a Darth Vader figure,
Wow.
roaming around like committing horrendous acts of violence in the name of Queen Victoria, in the name of British society, in the name of
Mm,
British government, to try and rein these clockwork beings back into what they deem as their place. So the story revolves around trying to find your own autonomy in a place in a society which is constantly telling you like, no, you must be this, you must be that, you must be a servant in this society or what have you.
mm,
And so we touch on things like the suffragette movement, the civil rights movement, the slave trade movement, everything, all of those things, all of those aspects are kind of like dovetailed into Clockwork Watch about really a group of people that just simply want to exist and
mm,
want to live and want to find themselves in a world which is constantly trying to crush them and push them and corral them into a space. So yeah, from the relatively humble beginnings of Yomi wanting to kind of like go like, I want to create something which feels like a more inclusive version of
mm,
steampunk
mm.
into something which has become a lot more wide reaching in terms of its themes and in terms of how we want to convey the story. And it can get quite dark at
Yeah.
points because these are themes which are quite dark. Fighting for your civil rights
Yeah.
is not an easy thing. It takes a
No.
lot of physical and mental energy, and
Yeah.
usually there are sacrifices within that. But
Absolutely.
that we feel is authentic to the story of Clockwork Watch in itself. We want to make sure that people feel and they understand that these are stories which have a lot of grit to them because they need to be able to authentically convey the fact that this is a difficult changing world, and these are themes which we seem to be experiencing again in our real world right now.
Honestly
So it's very,
speaking,
very
yeah.
relevant at this moment in time.
You've got a trunk load of teams into the making of Clockwork Watch, and I love it so much. I love all of the teams you've mentioned, the subject lines, the areas of messages you tend to preach and convey in the storyline. And also, the storyline is quite beautiful to hear you talk about it. I can feel your passion and your enthusiasm talking about that particularly. It's quite beautiful to me, really. And I need to say thank you very much for, going ahead to share all of these things. And that also want to make me to ask you because you've written first, you've written two. So far, we've talked about two books, and I'm just curious as to how you get started into writing. When you're writing a story, what comes first for you? Is it the world? Is it the character, or a single what if moment? And also, what are the typical themes you explore in your stories?
I don't think there's any usually a single point of starting when I start putting together stories. Like
Yeah.
sometimes I'll have a world in my head that I want to kind of populate.
Yeah.
Sometimes it'll be a character,
Yeah.
or like that'll be kind of like, I really think this character is very interesting to explore, and then I'll start building the world around the character specifically.
Yeah.
Sometimes it could be single image. So like I've got another book here, Deadlier, which is an anthology that I wrote, which is four-story anthology.
Wow.
And basically it's like, lots of different amazing artists that I worked with on this. And one of the stories that came from this story here, this character, um, came from an idea where I was talking with my wife about an idea of a fairy carrying a machine gun.
Mm.
And I'm not sure where the idea came from, that image in my head came from. But from that image in my head, I developed the idea of like, oh, okay, so what if a fairy was like in modern day society? And there's lots of stories that explore that sort of thing, really.
Mm.
And I thought to myself, actually, okay, so maybe let's change that a little. Let's shrink it and focus on a specific thing instead. So what if there's a fairy and she can integrate within British society, but she's been hired by the British government to become a spy.
Mm.
And so she can change her identity all the time because, she's a fae, she's a fairy in that particular case. But what if she's suffering from identity crisis because of that? Because her job now as a spy requires her to change her identity all the time. And
Yeah.
what if it's the last fairy or fae in the entire world? So
Mm.
she's the single person that is like of our own, of a race that's existing on this world, and she's constantly changing her identity all the time. And she's like, she has no idea where she comes from. She's got no one else that she can relate to because there's no other fays or fairies in the world.
Yeah.
And so that single idea, that single image of a fairy with a machine gun developed into a whole different thing altogether. So yeah, there's never singly one single thing that I tend to kind of like pick from, but I tend to develop things in the same way, which is kind of like making sure that the character becomes the most important thing about the story, and then developing outwards from that point onwards. So I do feel like that is kind of like the main thread, but there's no single one of, I guess, genesis, I think, in that point. But in terms of like what things I tend to like writing, I don't think there's any kind of like specific types of scenes, but I do revolve around a lot of certain themes. So for me, themes of identity are usually predominant
Wow.
within my
I
stories
see.
of like trying to find yourself
Yeah.
within a society or a world or a community which sees you as something different.
Mm.
Um, this is something which is very personal to me. It's like a young black guy with a Caribbean background growing up within British society
Yeah.
during the 1980s, trying to find himself, trying to find his identity.
Yeah.
My parents and my grandparents are from the Windrush generation. So, their experiences were also quite unique in terms of coming into the country and trying
Yeah.
to establish who they were and
Yeah.
what direction they wanted to go, whether they wanted to keep as much of their culture as possible, whether they wanted to assimilate, or a combination of those things,
Mm.
which is something that, exploring one of the games that I'm working on with the Windrush Tales team. That's sort of things that is, it's really important to me to try and express. So identity is something really powerful for me,
Mm.
to kind of delve into stories. But I also like exploring things like mental health as well, and kind of like the struggle of not just physical issues, but mental issues as well. I suffer from depression. I suffer from anxiety, especially social anxiety, which
Mm.
is like, the London Book Fair for me was like overwhelming. It's just like so many people around. I'm like, oh my God. Um, so these are things that I like to kind of explore, and those naturally kind of dovetail into the
Yeah.
identity because, as a person who suffers from social anxiety and struggles with like, public speaking and stuff like that, going out into a world where you feel you're like one of very, very few, or one of the one alone,
Mm.
um, and then needing to be able to talk to people and needing to be able to integrate
Yeah.
with people. But there's a voice inside of you which is screaming, saying, "Just get away, just run away, find a hole and hide."
Mm.
That is something which is very personal to me, but
Find a
also,
hole and hide.
yeah, it's I feel it's like it's also something that I feel a lot of people can also relate to, but it's, I like to express that in the stories because I think that's interesting. It's like, how do you overcome that? How do you get past those voices in your head which are constantly telling you to do the opposite thing of what you need to do?
Mm.
Um, so for me, that is, I think, integral to a lot of the stories that I tell throughout as well. Like regardless of whatever medium I'm kind of in, it's like I think that is something which I can really speak to in terms of my own experience, but I also feel
Mm.
like, a lot of the people that spoken to, the audiences, the readers that I've spoken to, also feel like they have that as well.
Yeah.
So hopefully that kind of in a way helps them in some sort of way. It kind of allows them some sort of a level of freedom and a little bit of hope, maybe that they can also
Yeah.
push past their own anxieties and their own issues
Absolutely.
and kind of express themselves in the world as well.
Mm. That's amazing to know, really. I love your answers to this question. And I love the title of Deadlier Dan. It seems to me to be quite great, quite pulling, and quite amazing. And it got me really wondering, are you able to pull all of these works together and write from one to two to three? And, it's quite amazing and quite commendable, really. Well done on these great titles you've been
Thank
sharing
you.
so far. Now, I want us to go into the conversation of feedbacks, readers' feedbacks. Because, one of the most interesting things to me as a writer is to sit back and listen to readers' feedback. And you may want to agree with me that one of the things that makes literature to be quite complex and interesting is the fact that it can be interpreted in different ways by different readers based on their opinions. Sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author. This actually reminded me of a feedback I got on my book yesterday, and it got me smiling. It's a very lovely, constructing ideas. Like, I don't agree with all you've written. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I love that. I love it when I'm not trying to impose whatever I believe, but I love it when I create something and it opens for further conversation. It could be quite debateful. It could be quite fine. I mean, it's that's one of the beauty of literature, and I love that really. He's my friend. He said, I disagree. I said, yeah, sure, you can disagree. That's lovely. I love that. And sometimes the readers might get a message intended by the author, and sometimes they might not get a message. Sometimes they might be close to getting the message. Sometimes they might be far from getting the message, say like one or several kilometers or even several miles away from getting the message. And sometimes they might just hilariously misunderstand the book and interpret it upside down. As interestingly fun as this sound, I would like to ask you, how do you feel when readers interpret your works differently than you intended? How does that make you feel as a writer and storyteller?
I think one of the things I had to learn very early in my career was that when you put out your story into the world and people get to finally read it and absorb it and kind of, I
Yeah,
guess, try to understand it, it no longer really becomes yours.
absolutely.
It's theirs now, and they will see it through the lens, whatever lens of their life that they're seeing it through. There's lots of things you cannot control as an author. One of them being is like you can't control the mood that the reader will be in when they read your book.
Yeah,
They can be, you can write the best story in the world, but if the person's in a really bad mood, sometimes it may just not land for them. And the other thing you can't control is how they interpret the stuff on the page or the screen.
mm,
And you just do your best to be able to try and be as clear as possible. But everyone's got a different perspective. Everyone sees things through a different lens. So I had to let go of that sense of control quite early on and understand that. And I think one of the very first reviews that I read of my work was very critical of the story I wrote. I wrote a story about a character called Neon, and he was
mm,
trapped within a corporate world, which is actually reflecting my experience of my life at that particular time, feeling trapped within a corporate world and needing to escape.
mm,
And I mean, this story is not really in print anymore, so I can happily spoil it. But basically, he kind of escapes from the corporate world, and then he realizes that actually he can't escape because he's actually trapped within
mm,
a machine that this corporate society has built around people to help stop employees from escaping their company. And so what they do is they tap into their dreams
yeah,
and they then take all the ideas of how those employees are escaping and then
mm,
use those ideas to make sure that the real employees can't escape their company. So it becomes
mm,
this horrible kind of like self-fulfilling prophecy, this loop of corporate
mm,
society controlling their employees. And one of the reviews that I got very much was like, well, this is just a rip-off of the Matrix. And I was like,
um,
wait a minute, like I literally called the main character Neon. Not Neo, but Neon.
well,
That should give you a hint that I was very much in not only inspired by the Matrix, but also using that as a springboard for the story,
well,
as a hint to say this is going to be a bit like the Matrix now, but I'm going to flip things on its head. So instead of it being like you're escaping from the Matrix and you're waking up, it's like you can't wake up. You're literally
Mm.
trapped in the corporate world.
Mm.
So at that point, I was quite irritated at that review because it's like you missed the point entirely. You just simply saw it as a Matrix ripoff, and instead of thinking, why did he do that? He went, oh no, it's just a ripoff. But it took me a while to kind of realize, oh, okay, you know what? They didn't get it. I may not have been clear enough in my intentions of that story. That may be my bad, but ultimately I can't be angry about that. I just got to let it
Yeah.
go. And that's happened a few times during my career where I've taken very, very obvious references to something and I've gone like, here is a clue that I'm referencing this thing here
Yeah.
because I want you to understand that it is a deliberate reference and I'm trying to subvert it in some way. But people have gone, he's just ripping off that thing. And I'm like, okay, it's all good. It's all right, whatever. It's fine. Um, so yeah, I think those instances have allowed me to take a step back from reviews, whether they're good or whether they're bad. I mean, it's lovely
Yeah.
to have a nice review, and I've read some really lovely, lovely kind of feedback on some of my books that
Mm.
I've maybe gone, oh, they absolutely get it, or they may not have necessarily got it, but they enjoyed it on their own terms, and that
Yeah.
is wonderful in itself. But at the same time, like it doesn't negate necessarily the bad reviews either, or the bad feedback. It's like people will come with their own expectations and their own baggage
Yeah.
to the works, and you
Absolutely.
can't control that.
Yeah.
You can only kind of like help do as much as you can when you've
Yeah.
created the thing yourself. So, yeah, I always feel like there is a relationship there between you and the audience, and you're trying as best to make sure that relationship is healthy, which
Yeah.
means not going on and attacking the
So
audience and saying like, "Oh my
yeah.
God, you got it wrong. You misinterpreted it, or you missed the clues, or anything like that." It's just like, no, that is your thing. It's okay. It's like it's
Yeah.
perfectly fine. You have an opinion, and it's perfect within your rights to express that opinion. And
Mm.
I've read books which, for me, are practically flawless.
Mm.
They're amazing books. They do everything right. The themes, the characters, the settings, the world building, brilliant. And I've read reviews of them, and the reviews are like, they're all right.
One
And I'm
star.
like, yeah, 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 for real. It's like, and I'm like, did you read the same book as me?
Yeah, you were like, did you read the same book? Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand. Is it a different title you read from the same author?
yeah, yeah. I was confused, but that's just the nature of it. And as a writer, you can't take this sort of thing too personally. I know when you're writing, you do put parts of yourself into your books.
Yeah.
That you can't escape that. It becomes a personal thing because then it's expression of your own psyche, and every single character has a piece of you inside of them. But
But
but at the same time, you can't let that be a way of the audience feeling like they're attacking you when they're critical of it. They're just
yeah,
simply taking what they've got on the page
yeah,
and interpreting it in the way which they feel is best to
absolutely.
interpret. So yeah, it's a tricky one, whether they get the message, whether they get the themes or anything like that or
Mm,
not. But being able to divorce yourself from that feedback a little bit, I think is really important for your own mental health. I mean, I,
absolutely.
I can't always do that,
Yeah,
like I struggle sometimes with that, but I try to do it all the same because I've reached that point in my career and in my life now where it's like I can't afford to get hung up too much on what people are saying. It's otherwise I'll
yeah.
just drive myself crazy.
You've developed the thick skin.
Oh well, I'm not sure about that, but I'm trying to. I'm definitely trying to.
That's quite amazing to know, really. And I think this is one of the things that makes book conversation and book club meetings to be quite fun. The stance whereby we can 10 people, 15 people can come together to read a particular book, and the first person's review differ from the second person's review, differ slightly, the third person's review differs again from the fourth person's review, and on and on and on and on. We keep having a trunkload of different opinion, or people who haven't read the same book come together to talk about it, and they're giving different reviews, different feedbacks, different opinions, and sometimes some may construct on another, some may, agree with one another. Some like, oh yeah, I read that part, that was quite amazing, stuff like that. And at some point, it may get you wondering that do we read the same book? It's quite amazing, really, how readers interpret works based on their opinion, based on how the story relates to them. I think this is one of the beautiful part of it, really, how they're able to evoke themselves, involve themselves, see a part of their life in the story that the author have written, etc. I think it's a fun thing, really.
It is. It is. You can have people love your book in entirely different ways. You know, 100 people
Yeah,
read the book and say, "I love this book," and have entirely like 100 different opinions about
yeah,
what they loved about it and what spoke
yeah,
to them about it. And that's beautiful in itself. So yeah, you can't. You got to take the rough with the smooth and the good with the bad with this sort of thing. It is
absolutely.
what it is.
And now, just apart from the books we've mentioned so far, do you have any other works you've authored or say currently working on?
Oh God, so many, so many, but some of them are under NDA, so I can't talk about it. I've written or helped write a couple games recently, which haven't properly been
Wow.
announced yet. So waiting for those to kind of go through. Obviously, we talked about Tales of Kenzera Zhao already, but that actually won a BAFTA last week, which was like mind blowing. To be
Wow.
part of that experience, to have like the team as won a BAFTA for this game that we were all put together and worked towards. So that
Mm,
was absolutely incredible. We're still working on Windrush Tales. The team with Windrush Tales, such an incredibly talented team,
wow.
and we're still trying to put that together. It's been a long journey for that. We've been working on that for a good few years now. And we've kind of reached a point where we need to get a little bit more funding, a little bit more money to help
Mm,
kind of push it over the line a little bit. But we're still going with that a little bit. We finished shooting a short film that my friend Yomi, that I talked about earlier on, he
yeah.
wrote and directed, called
Interesting.
Age of Quorum, which you mentioned in my intro.
Yeah.
So we're working on that together. We're getting through post production on that at this moment in time, and kind of making sure that that kind of like reaches a point where we can release it as well. And we may have
Mm,
some news about what comes after that as well
yeah.
in the coming months. Um, funnily enough, I got a copy of this, which is a short comic book that
That
I
is
worked
on.
on,
Oh.
which is basically there's a team of podcasters called
Oh.
James and Fuhad together called Shits and Gigs. Basically, they're very very popular podcasters. They've got
Mm,
audience of millions, and they basically went on tour in Australia earlier on this year. And
mm,
my agent was in touch with their agent, and they
uh,
were asking if I could write a short comic book which talked about what happened when they kind of met together at university and the development of their career together as podcasters. And so
mm,
I was working with them to help create a kind of semi biographical version of their lives. So that was
yeah.
a fantastic experience in itself, and that was only very limited to the people that were attending the Australian tour. But
Mm.
that was a brilliant experience to be able to work on that. And yeah, there's lots of other things as well. I think I could probably talk for days in terms of the amount of stuff that I'm currently working on. I have a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies, but it's I'm
Wow.
trying to kind of keep on top of everything where I can, really.
Yeah. That's quite amazing, really. You've got a lot ongoing, really. And I hope you find some times to sleep.
I sleep. I mean, part of the reason why I'm wearing my glasses is because my eyes are so tired because I don't sleep very
Oh,
well these
goodness.
days. So it's sleep is
That's a
elusive
lot you
for me.
get ongoing, Corey. You should go and
Uh,
sleep after this interview,
oh,
maybe.
I wish I could. I need to do I need to conduct an interview because I work for PlayStation at the moment as well. I
Oh,
do I do
goodness.
editorial. I need to conduct an interview after this, so so I won't even be able to have a
That's
little
a
nap
lot
or
of
anything. I
work
need to prepare
ongoing.
for it. It doesn't stop. It never stops, man. It never
Oh,
stops.
good. That's quite a lot, really. Thank you for sharing. Thank you. And now, just as a published author, I'd like to have your advice for upcoming writers. These are those who are still struggling with writing and publishing a book. And also, where exactly can viewers get a copy of your books from?
So the easy answer to the last part of the question is, well, I've got a website, coreybrotherson.com.
Yeah.
That has everything there. It's got a link to my shop there. Not everything on my shop is actually available. I tend to try and get stock whenever I can. But I
Mm,
usually say to people, just drop me an email or what have you. It's like my email address on there
yeah.
and get hold of me easily enough. I've got a Patreon there as well, so people can contact me if they want to get copies of my book that way. In terms of advice, so this is the more difficult one, especially for people that are struggling. So the landscape of the industry, whether it's comic books, games, films,
Yeah.
books, is very difficult right now.
Yeah, it is.
Things are being released every single day. The markets are flooded by,
Yeah.
authors and by creators.
Mm,
So, the battle for the attention for eyeballs and for actual people's attention these days is higher than it's ever been in human history. We
yeah.
are flooded with stuff to consume, as it were, to read, to
Yeah.
watch. And so trying to find your voice in today's industry, especially because the industries are suffering a lot, is difficult. And on
Mm.
top of that, we're fighting against AI, where, you know, people are making their own stuff through
Honestly.
AI, which is ripping, you know, existing stuff off.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's hard. It's really, really hard right now. And I sympathize with anybody that is genuinely struggling. You know, we're all struggling out here as well. Like I've been in, you know, writing for 24 years, and I still find days where I'm like, I don't know, you know, what I'm going to do with this story, how I'm going to get it bought, or who's going to buy it, if anyone's going to buy it at all. Um, but what I would say is for people that are struggling is that one, you as a person in this sea of different people trying to create stuff,
Mm.
you have an individual perspective.
Yeah,
No one in this entire world will see the world in the exact same way that
you
you
do.
do.
Absolutely.
And that is valuable. That is exceptionally valuable.
Absolutely valuable.
Especially,
Mm.
you know, like I said, with AI, AI is just basically scraping everybody else's ideas and everybody else's perspectives and turning it into this sludge. You as a person have that unique perspective which AI cannot take from you without you putting it out there and
Absolutely.
AI taking it from you.
Yeah,
So that makes your voice unique. It doesn't
unique.
matter how many different, you know, you will be influenced by lots of different things.
Mm.
That's everybody, you know. I'm
Yeah,
influenced by lots of different sources, but
absolutely.
eventually your own voice will come out. And the only way you're going to get your voice out there and to get your work out there is
Mm.
to keep on working at it. And
Absolutely.
this goes to the thing where I said, like, things are difficult. Things are difficult, which makes it even more important for you to be able to strive and continue working and to
Mm.
continue working on your own stuff.
Yeah.
It is a struggle. It is hard. I'm not going to lie. It is really, really difficult at times. But the only way you'll be able to get your individual voice out there, which is incredibly valuable, which is really, you know, the world needs to hear your voice
Yeah.
and get it out there, is to make sure that you continue working to get it out there. And because we
Absolutely.
have, yeah, you know, it's like because we have those elements of being able to self-publish and to put
Mm.
stuff out there, you know, there are avenues which allow us to get our voice out there and allow us to express ourselves. And you know what? Sometimes that first or the second time, or even the fifth or tenth time, may not necessarily be great or be as good as you expected it to be.
Absolutely.
You just keep on going.
You
You
just have
know,
to
you're
keep
only going to
on
get better by
doing.
doing. You're not going to get better by going, oh, this first one was terrible. I'm just going to quit. You
I'm
know,
tired
it's like,
already.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Let's
yeah.
just stop.
Yeah, yeah, you know, it is tiring, and it sometimes can be a bit dispiriting, especially when talking about the feedback thing as well. Like people
You
going,
know.
"Oh my God, this is terrible." Um, but the only way you're going to get better, the only way you're going to get your voice out there is just to keep on doing it, just keep on working at it. And the more you work at it, the better you'll get, and the more your voice will be established, and the more that voice will start coming through into your work.
Mm.
So for me, I think that's the most lots of important lessons I think that writers and authors and creators can learn, especially in this world right now. But I think for me personally, the most important thing that I always try to tell myself is like the only way you're going to be able to get your stuff out there is to actually work at it and get your stuff out there.
Yeah.
And you know, it doesn't matter how much AI is out there, it doesn't matter how difficult the world may be right now. It's
Mm.
being able to work as much as possible to channel all of those feelings, all those emotions, all those difficulties into the work itself and
Mm.
try your best to do it.
Yes.
Sometimes the means aren't there for you. Sometimes, you know, financially it's not, you know, you're not going to be able to self-publish or what have you.
Mm.
But having the material and then going out and hopefully speaking to people, whether it's online, whether it's in person or what have you. So when the opportunity arrives and someone says, you know what, I want to give you a chance, you've got something there.
Yeah.
You're not already working on it. You're not kind of saying, oh, let me get back to you because I may have something in a few months' time.
Mm.
You've got it there, right there and then.
Yeah.
And you can say, you know what, here it is. Here is my thoughts on a page, on a screen, or anything like that for you to be able to interpret and have a look and maybe do something with.
Mm.
And as long as you keep on putting yourself out there, those opportunities will eventually come. Sometimes
It's
it could take
real.
a long time.
It's real.
And again, don't get me wrong, sometimes you need to be in a position of privilege to have those opportunities in the first place. And
Mm.
that is something which is, you know, really difficult to overcome. And it's something else, which is an entirely different subject altogether in
Mm.
itself. But having the work, putting in the work as much as you're possible, whether it's just you and a pen and a piece of paper,
Yeah,
that can be enough sometimes to
absolutely.
just get it there. So it's just being able to work as much as possible, just work through as much as possible wherever you can, whether you're scribbling something down in your lunch break or you got 5 minutes before you pass out in your bed and because you're working so hard on everything else and your family and trying to get
Mm,
everything just done through the day. You got 5 minutes before you kind of fall asleep, take out your phone, put that note down, get a little paragraph down. That's
yeah,
it.
yeah,
That one paragraph that you do, if you do that every single day, you know, you'll have several paragraphs by the end of a month. By
absolutely.
the end of the year, you could have
Amazing.
half a book. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? So it's just consistency, it's just persistence.
Mm,
And I know it's hard. I know it's hard. I've been there. Last year, I
mm,
nearly
mm,
gave up myself. And that's me
mm.
being in the industry for a long period of time. But I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't because several opportunities landed in my lap straight after that point
Very
because I was
lovely.
talking. So, just got to keep going, keep moving forward, keep writing, keep working on your craft because your voice is important and the world needs your voice. Get it out
Absolutely.
there.
Oh, wow. I need to say that this advice is quite inspiring, quite motivating, and quite moving. And I'm inspired as well, really. And I'm looking forward and I'm hopeful as well that viewers, even including myself, would love to utilize it. Thank you so much for an amazing, beautiful, life changing advice that you've got there. And I also left a link in the description part of this interview where interested viewers can get a copy of Corey Brotterson's books directly on Amazon and Barnes& and Nobles on his website and also another platform. I also left a link to social media pages for possible followings. So thank you so much, Corey, for accepting the invitation to be featured on P English Literature. I must say this is more than awesome, quite energetic, quite amazing, quite fun, and very inspiring speaking with you, having this conversation around your beautiful titles, your inspirations, and advice. Thank you so much for coming on. I am motivated.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. I love getting to chat to you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's a pleasure as well.